And, every so often there'll be a person who just bugs me. I'm like, that person in particular, I just, can't. There was one person that I just go, God, they're so showy. They're so like, there's just this narcissism. And then it just hit me one day. Maybe I was doing some IFS work or something like, oh, you've got a little part that actually, because I'm such an introvert generally, but I have this little part that's like, no, I love getting up on stage and like, and it was a very playful part. Once I could let it out, it wasn't as extreme as the example that I was so resistant to in another person. But there was a part that very honestly, when I started working with it, was like, no, I like to play. I like to, get up on stage and give a speech and see if I can do it better next time. And uh, so once I was able to kind of integrate that, see what was going on in my shadow, then I was able to look, at the person a little more realistically, and it wasn't this triggering thing.
Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day, listeners. This is CJMiller, the host of the Spiritual Artist Podcast. I have a great guest today. What I notice about myself is that I tend to focus on energy. I see things in a form of energy. And this person reached out to me via Instagram and started following my Instagram channel. And Orlando was I was captivated by the energy. So I'm so excited. And as I've gotten to know him more and more, what a fascinating life. So let me introduce Orlando O'Shea. He is an internal family systems practitioner, a Jungian life coach, master of social work student, writer, and abstract artist. Of course, Orlando is an artist. Why else would we be attracted together? He specializes in working with the LGBTQIA community, neurodivergent populations, and anyone interested in living more authentically. He identifies as a trans man, a father, a nature lover, another common denominator with me, and an existential soul. So good morning, Orlando. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Happy to be here.
I am thrilled. We chatted briefly a week or two ago, and there's just nonstop connections. I'm also a big nature lover and a big gardener. Um, And what I want to share with our listeners, and one of the things, first, let's talk a little bit about your art. And are you making art right now, or?
I am. I have an art show in December, and I'm sure as an artist, preparing for art shows afterward, you don't want to see art for like a month.
Yes.
So I had a month off, and now I'm just starting to work on some different projects, and the creative juices are flowing again. So
It is amazing. It is a lot of work. And actually, I think I'm on the tail end of that as well. When I did a show last fall, and what happens is there's a little run over of my excitement. So I finish the show, I hang it, and then I have a little more energy, and I actually usually do one or two more paintings.
okay,
But
okay,
they
cool.
but they, they don't even go into the show because they're too late for the show. And
Yeah,
then I crash.
okay. A very similar trajectory, a little.
Right. And
Yeah.
then I just don't even want, it's like, don't, no, no. So, and I think that's that gestation period, right? So how was your first show then? Or was it your first show?
It was my first show, yeah. It was beautiful. It was, surreal, it was surreal because of the way I moved into being an artist, and, I brought a lot of my authentic self into it, so it was very, it's a very different thing, I'm a writer, and, having your kinda soul out there for everybody to see is a very different experience than having it, on a page that you're kind of mindfully, making your way through the world with, so it was good and it was interesting.
So you have written stuff too as well? Are you?
Yeah, yeah, I've been a writer since I was probably, I mean, I think I came out of the womb writing. So I was writing poetry as a little, I found a little something in a kindergarten, one of those little book packets where you have the double lines with the little ones in the middle. And it was such an existential little uh, piece of work there. I was talking about being a flea, and if I were on a dog and if it bit me, I would, have to move around because I didn't want to end up suffering in a sidewalk gutter.
I love it.
But, oh, okay, yeah, that's
Y-
true to form.
Do you know what's really interesting? That's another common denominator we have. I was a journalism major, and
Oh,
I actually embraced writing before art when I was younger. And what I wanted to share something with you. It's really funny. I'm working on a book of parables,
oh, interesting,
and
interesting. Yeah,
and
that's
and so
cool.
I'm taking spiritual lessons
Yeah.
or what I consider spiritual truths and converting them into parable format where it's more abstracted. But it's so interesting that you say that. I guess I'll have to add a dog and a flea parable.
Right, right. Well, I love that because we're our roots as humans, we are storytellers, and I really believe that stories are in our bones and our DNA, and throughout our history as humans, we've related to life through stories. So it's a cool thing you're doing, and I'll be interested to see how that progresses. Yeah.
I agree with you. We are storytellers, and I had a real weird flashback memory as I've started this book literally just a couple weeks ago, and I'll share with the listeners. I'm starting to get more in touch with the fact that I am an empath and I am intuitive, and
Mhm.
I've kind of blocked that. I blocked that, and so I'm using that. I'm actually getting myself into that state of connection,
Yeah.
and then writing the parable.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And great that you're connecting with that again because I think a lot of empathic, sensitive, intuitive people, because I would call myself highly sensitive, I would call myself very intuitive, but I think the world can, pull a trip on you. And by the time you reach adulthood, you've received so many negative messages for that a lot of people do push that kind of into their shadow and create this persona that then you have to unlearn over time.
Yeah, I remembered when I was very little sitting outside in the summer with the neighborhood kids, and I would tell ghost stories. I would just, off the top of my head, make up these ghost stories. And I think storytellers, maybe that goes hand in hand a lot, and being empathic and storytelling, because you have to understand what it's like to be in another body, right? Another being.
Yeah, absolutely. There's such a soul to storytelling. I mean, it's one of those great portals into the soul. And that's why in Jungian work, there's a big emphasis on myth and story as a parallel to our own soul journey.
Well, tell us more about this Jungian work because I want to share with our listeners that I read a lot of books, but I tried I tried to
Yes.
read some of this and it was just so overwhelming for me. So if you could put it in, I tell my AI, say this like you're talking to a kindergartner. How would you sum up that? The method.
I'm really bad at summing up and saying things like I talk to a kindergartner. I'd probably talk to a kindergartner like I talk to a 9-year-old friend. But what I will say is that your experience is not at all uncommon. And, I've been interested in union work for well over a decade now, but I'm sure in my reading that I had the same experience. I'm sure I kind of stumbled across a book on Jung and, opened it up and said, what the heck, and put it to the side. Uh, and that's very, very typical um, for trying to access a lot of Jungian literature because it is very dense. Sometimes it can be very uh, almost dry. And so I think what can be easier for folks and how I started my journey is I started learning from Jungians. So people who have taken that material and then transferred that material, and there's some wonderful people around. James Hollis is one of my favorites, Thomas More, that they just take that really dense material and for me bring it to life. I could say make it readable, but for me it really brings it to life and brings the soul of it out. So you might play around a little. James Hillman is a wonderful Jungian to explore.
Oh, well, great. You know what? If you could send me a couple of those names, I'll put them in your description so the
Sure. I'd be glad.
listeners can look up. But I will try that. Right?
Yeah.
I will try that. It's interesting you say that because I've been trained in New Thought, Ernest Holmes, and Thomas Troward, and Troward is, if you try to read him, you're like, what the heck, right?
Right, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's, you say here, and I'd love for you to explain this because I will share. I don't know, my listeners. We just spoke with what's called a constellations facilitator, Catherine Revoix, and she works with the dynamic of your youth and how you fit into your family dynamic. So is that similar to an internal family systems practitioner, or is it are different? I mean, how do you work with that?
No, it isn't similar. I mean, there might be some similarities that people could, talk about. But when I first started my IFS journey in 2013, and I was signed up for a 6-week local course, I did it because a friend asked me to do it with her, and I thought, what the hell is this? And I thought the very same thing. Is this going to be something to do with my family and how I fit into my family? But actually, internal family systems is all uh, me and me, and then by extension, how I relate to the world and others. And so basically, when they're talking about internal family systems, they're looking at the individual as a multiplicity, that we have this core spiritual, calm, confident self energy that we may not be accessing, but it's there. It's there in everybody. And then we have parts to our system. And so these parts of us have different, often conflicting needs, desires, objectives, wants. Just like if you had parents and then you had a whole bunch of kids and you had an aunt and uncle running around. So that's where it gets into that idea of internal family systems.
So it's like the family of one, the family of oneself.
It is the family of oneself. And so that's where the really interesting work comes into it, because we have parts that um, may be very core to a lot of things we're doing, and they may be just living their lives with us. But then we can have other parts that really hold burdens from traumas that we've experienced in our lives. And those parts can kind of get frozen in time. And along with that, they can often run the show in various ways of how we're living our lives. And I think we all have that experience sometimes where we'll go, what happened? This person triggered me and I just blew up, or, I started like fawning and trying to make everything okay. And whenever I get around this person, it just brings this out in me. Um, a lot of those qualities that we don't quite understand, we could look at both from an internal family systems perspective. And then, Jungian psychology is very similar in the sense that that modality looks at the psyche as a multiplicity as well. So they would have the language a little bit different and call those complexes, but there is in each modality, there's that multiplicity.
That's fascinating. Yes, that just happened to me last night. I'm in a prayer group, and a guy said something to me, and I stepped into somebody else. Like he and I call it a trigger. Like it's a trigger.
Yeah, yeah.
And suddenly I was into this, the more of a defensive victim, like child kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, what the heck? And then I couldn't understand. I really even couldn't understand what his point was. Like,
Right.
I like, what are you saying? All I know is that it was triggering me.
Right.
And I'm like, what is he trying to say? But boy, it's making me angry.
Yeah, isn't that, I mean, it happens to all of us, and, that's why I think I was so drawn to internal family systems because I had such a I would have called myself such a hugely self-protective person, uh, based on my life experience. So I kind of was like, here you are, here I am, and let's have this big wall between us. And through that work, I started getting to know that part. Oh, this is a part of me. This isn't all of me. And what happens also, which is really interesting in internal family systems, is we look at a lot of the times these parts that can just seem like us. When we start working with them, when they start trusting us, when we start building relationships and supporting them from a self led perspective, those parts give us a little space, and then other parts can come up. And so we can get these cool, new, authentic parts of our personality and grow and shift our lives in really like cool and meaningful ways because these parts are able to like now have a little playtime that were so like suppressed into our shadow that we didn't even know they were there. So that's all part of the beautiful work. I love seeing with clients. I love seeing in my own life.
It's fascinating. It's making me think of all sorts of questions. And, I think of first, we can talk. I'd love to talk about how do you do that? How do you let some of those stronger parts rest back? The other issue that I'm thinking of is how, as I get older, I realize that everything is a microcosm of the macrocosm, right?
Yeah,
And if we look at society today, it's the same thing. There's
yeah.
things in society trying to push down other parts of the society.
Right, right. Yeah. You're
Eh,
so right on in that. And I remember in my undergraduate, I had this cool class called the History of Satan. I had to take one more class. And I was like, let me take History of Satan. And I got to do this, like the final was just basically do whatever you want as long as you incorporate all the material. So you could do a dance, you could bake a cake. Really cool teacher. So I did a whole paper um, from the perspective of Satan and just kind of like, trying to redeem himself. And one of the things I had said, and I used a lot of Jungian psychology in that paper, and one of the things that I was talking about from the perspective of Satan is that, in our society, a lot of times what we do is we make everybody else the enemy.
mm,
And so you have to be wrong so I can be right. And that's my identity. So we kind of push this Satan model onto other people and onto the world. You're wrong, very binary. I'm right, I'm good, you're bad. But then we have all of the shadow material that we don't want to look at. So we take all of this stuff that we're like, no, no, let's keep this locked away, all this stuff about myself, and let's project it out onto these people, society, the bad people, the other political party, whatever it is. So I don't have to look at this in myself. And I think that we do that on such a large scale in society. We're seeing it more than ever, in these current times. And that's a really interesting dynamic that you're touching on.
and what's even more interesting is there's two sides. Of course, there's two sides to approach this. The one side is how do you make peace with that force, you know, and how do you create a space where we all can speak? Because you can't. I guess what I'm trying to say is I was out yesterday and I was talking to someone and she is very spiritual
Yeah,
and she immediately goes into the drama of what's going on in the world today. And she said, how can you see? And she said, how do you deal with it? And I said, well, I try to see God in everything.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she was like, I can't see God there.
yeah,
And and I said, well, I look, that's a challenge, isn't it?
Mhm. Such a challenge. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's one we're all dealing with. I'm certainly dealing with it, because I really, one of my big values in life, I have two kind of main values in my life, and one is leading with love.
Mm, me too.
Yeah, so leading with love, authenticity is my other. And I think those two together are great companions, but it's a very, I mean, especially these days, I think we're all getting tested. And I'm a marginalized community. I'm a trans man. We're getting pummeled right now, the trans community. I'm not a Black trans woman who is even
Right.
more marginalized, but I have plenty of marginalization in this political arena. And so I say that because I don't say that in a Pollyanna way. Let me just lead with love
Yeah,
and all
exactly.
of my privilege. Um, I think that for me, if I don't look at it as, I look at it as a practice. It's a practice. So if I can't love this person and I just think this person is horrible, I can't do it. I can think of one person in particular
Yeah.
that comes to my mind. I can't do it. I don't have to tell myself, okay, let me love this person. But I can tell myself, this is the challenge. This is what I'm holding right now in my practice of leading with love. Is that right now I can't figure out how to love this person. So that's what I'm there with. Almost like, I have a Zen Buddhism background,
Background. Yeah.
a couple other things, in my wanderings. And so I love Zen koans. I just took those right away when I started Zen practice because all you have to do with a Zen koan is just hold it and go, what is it bringing up for me? It's a relationship. So when I think of, one person in particular that I can't stand and see no redeeming qualities in, I don't have to have that figured out. I just have to go, okay, this is my practice. This is where it is right now. And that affords me a little more freedom than saying I have to love this person in this way and I'm failing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, oh, see, I have so many things. Okay. So one thing I learned that I brought up with this person yesterday, my yoga teacher told me, and one day I came into yoga, right? And I have to drive up this very busy highway, and people are just idiots. No, you know how you just get right. They're cutting in front of you and everything. And I walk into yoga, right? I'm going to get calm. And and I walk in like, God dang it, right? That lady drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And my yoga instructor, she turned to me and said, you know what I do in situations like that? I think, when am I like that? When
Yeah.
am I like that? And so that's what I told the woman yesterday. I said, try to think. And of course, people get defensive, but we're all there. We all have those parts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when I was cutting in and out of traffic, I was being like that energy of that woman.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Y- you
Yeah, and
know,
that's a beautiful, I love that because that's doing that, part of that shadow work is where is this thing reflected in me? Um, where are these qualities reflected in me? That's edgy. It's edgy stuff. We don't like it.
no, we don't.
No, 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 no.
Because
And
you're immediately like, I'm never like that, but that's
yeah,
not true. There are
yeah,
times I know for a fact, like I'll sit there and go, I'm never greedy. Well, like if sometimes I am, sometimes I see myself, you talk about that little part of me slipping out.
yeah,
If it's a
yeah.
plate of chocolate,
Right. Yeah,
there are times that I would get competitive and greedy.
yeah.
So
Showy, you know, egotistical. It's interesting because sometimes, there's some people, and we can bring it a little more into the personal because I think the political is so triggering for people. They're like, I'm out.
right.
Uh, But I think if we bring it a little more into the personal, in my life, I've done a lot of community advocating. Uh, so I'm working with a lot of different people professionally in a lot of different ways. And, every so often there'll be a person who just bugs me. I'm like, that person in particular, I just, can't. There was one person that I just go, God, they're so showy. They're so like, there's just this narcissism. And then it just hit me one day. Maybe I was doing some IFS work or something like, oh, you've got a little part that actually, because I'm such an introvert generally, but I have this little part that's like, no, I love getting up on stage and like, and it was a very playful part. Once I could let it out, it wasn't as extreme as the example that I was so resistant to in another person. But there was a part that very honestly, when I started working with it, was like, no, I like to play. I like to, get up on stage and give a speech and see if I can do it better next time. And so once I was able to kind of integrate that, see what was going on in my shadow, then I was able to look, at the person a little more realistically, and it wasn't this triggering thing. So it's always interesting when you get as also jealousy. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
jealous of this
Oh,
person. Jealousy is a great trailhead into like IFS and Jungian work. So whenever I get jealous, which isn't that often, I'm like, oh, I'm jealous. Like, let me look into this. What am I jealous of?
it's so funny you say that because I got an email this morning, a newsletter from an artist that I know, and they're having a show, and they're okay, listeners. This is the real Chris. So I think this person I sent when I have conversations with this artist, they're not real deep. They're just
Mhm.
very shallow. And so I get triggered and I'm like, "Ah, ah, ah," and that's jealousy. And I actually recognized it, which was
Right.
good,
Yeah.
stepping back and recognizing it. And so then I thought, I hope she has a great show. Right.
Right.
But I had to do the work, right?
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
do the work.
Yeah.
It's it's not like instantaneous. Trust me. There was a moment where I was like, "Oh, look at her just like standing next to her painting, all dressed up." And you know what I mean? Like in
I
that really
do.
expensive jewelry or whatever, like getting all bitchy about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, Chris, just wish her well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
And
wanted to, oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No,
a
go ahead.
lot of that work isn't fun at all. I mean, it can be excruciating. I think people here, when I talk about doing shadow work or doing soul work, it can almost sound glamorous. People go, oh, cool, let me do some shadow work. And it's like, no, it can be excruciatingly painful work, and my job is to sit here with you and hold that with you so you're not alone in it, because that's a very important part of integrating these things that are really, really in the shadow and really, really repressed in us, often because of, pretty big trauma. So it's not a, bouquet of roses, but it's work that I love, and it's work that I love holding for other people. And it can be so transformative. It's those gifts that you find, in the compost in these dark places. There's just these jewels in there that just really bring us home to ourselves, and that's the beauty of the work, I think.
I love that. It all ties into what you were saying. Um, when you talk about holding it, like you said, just hold it. Um, how do you practice holding the space?
For others,
Yes.
it's been a long process. I've always been an empathetic person. I've always been a person that I think people project onto a little bit, because sometimes, even when I was young, I would have people when they just come and tell me a bunch of stuff, and then say something like, wow, you're really wise for your age. And I thought, I didn't really do anything. I just am kind of good at holding space, I think. Um, so I think it's one of the areas that I'm naturally drawn to. And then I think over time, um, and a lot of life experience. A lot of it is life experience. So I think when you're holding space for people, it's really important that you're not judgmental.
Mm,
It's really important that you're kind of unconditional in your care for them. And I think through my own life experience, which has been so broad, that I'm able to do that in a kind of a unique way because I've been around so many different type of people. I've had so many different type of people who I would consider teachers to me, gang members, many people in the unhoused community where I worked for a long time, my own life experience. So I think that, and also the whole spectrum of individuals. I was raised by a psychologist who had a private practice in Beverly Hills. I didn't rise to those standards by societal standards at the time, but I've really run across the gamut. I think also being on a suicide hotline for 5 years, a transgender specific suicide hotline, taught me a ton because when I first got on that hotline, I didn't even have my BA in psychology, and I was a good listener. I was this empathetic person, and they gave me like a very short little training, and you forget half of it because it's like 4 hours, and you can't retain that much information. And then they set me free, and here's these people wanting to end their life, and I'm supposed to do something. And so I was really bad at it for like 2 weeks. And I was going, oh my God. And then I thought, wait, IFS because you've been studying IFS. So then I switched over and started using the IFS model. Okay, what part of these people feel like things are so bad that they don't want to live anymore? Can I hear that story? Can I really get in there and understand that part and make sure that part is seen and witnessed fully? And as soon as I switched into that, all of a sudden things were changing massively. And I was like, oh, this really is a ticket to this work. So that's something that's been really big in my life. And then that's why I really was like, I want to shift into this IFS Jungian world full time.
wow. That's wonderful. I was going to say that I think holding the space is a large part just being, like you just said, non-judgmental, empathetic, and unconditional love. That just unconditional love. Um, but I love how you talk about focusing on the parts of a person. It's so funny. The discussion we had last night, which was a little trigger, which brought out a part of me that I wasn't aware of, is um this guy asked me, we're all, it's a spiritual group, folks. So we all open up. And this guy asked me out and out, did I ever think about killing myself?
Mhm,
And, and I said, yes. And he said,
mhm.
well, but really, like, but really, as though like, and in my little self was like, what do you mean? Like there's a line of, oh, I'm not serious unless I like cut the skin, or it's just
Oh
triggered.
yeah.
It
Yeah, oh
triggered me.
of course,
I was
yeah.
like,
And that was his part saying that, right? I mean,
right,
that's
he
not
kept
coming from
saying, "Well, I mean
myself.
the line. Were you ever on the cutting edge or something?" I'm like, "What are you talking about like cutting edge?" Yes, how when you're young, and I was gay and growing up in a
Yeah,
blue collar town. Uh I was opposite of Beverly Hills. I was in a city where if you wore yellow,
yeah,
if you were a boy wearing yellow, you were gay. I mean,
right.
not just pink. You couldn't wear powder blue. You couldn't wear yellow. I mean, you basically had to wear brown.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
So I was in this world, and so I think that, and we also talked, and I think this is what you were sharing. Those contrasts in life make us wonderful people. They make us sensitive people. They make us. I don't know if I'd ever wish myself to have that experience again, but boy, I wouldn't be who I am.
We wouldn't be who we are, right? And I think that's so important. And, for a long time, I felt a lot of shame because I was raised in this certain environment. There were a lot of expectations on me. Yet my father, he graduated in an Ivy League college, got his private practice in Beverly Hills. He was from a working class family. He had a lot of PTSD from active combat. He was in the Navy, a lot of PTSD. So there were a lot of shadows in our world. It was a pretty violent household uh, growing up, especially when I was younger before my parents divorced. And then I dropped out of high school. I was hanging out with gang members, which was ended up for me being a very beautiful experience because it was, we had a lot of people from South Central LA in our school, maybe about half the people. And so I made a lot of friendships with people who were gang members. And there was a resonance there of me feeling like an outsider and this population getting that, really understanding what it's like.
What it's like.
What it's like. I was failing in school. I had some pretty big tragedy in my past. I wasn't able to outrun my nervous system, my past trauma, and so there was this bond. But I was a very wild adolescent. I ran away from home. I did drop out of high school. So for a very long time, I was a high school dropout until really in my early 40s, going back and getting my BA. So I have all these interesting identities: high school dropout, college graduate, graduate student, and I have two beautiful kids of my own. One's a classical guitarist. I always joke it's the only way she can rebel against me. Parent covered
Classical guitar.
Follow your bliss. Okay, let me be a classical guitarist. But I think I've realized that that's one of my strengths is, and that's why authenticity is so important to me, because I bring who I am to the table as I am, and that gives others permission. Be exactly where you are, exactly where you are in this moment, without expectation. Let's just start there. And that can be a very powerful thing.
I love that. Yeah, just be who you are without expectation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. That's a great phrase, because the expectation is what does us in.
It does. It does. Yeah. And it's all those little parts. I mean, it's those parts of us that are like, you have a part that's like, no, you need to be different. So this person, and it often stems from our childhood. If I don't do everything right and act in a certain way, I'm not going to get my needs met by my parent. My parent who is narcissistic, or my parent who is overwhelmed, or my parent who is very controlling, or my parent who has too much on their plate, whatever the story is as we're growing up, and it's pretty universal, we have to adapt and we have to figure out how to survive. And so those parts of us still go around doing that in the present day. And they have a lot to say, especially if we're not in relationship to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was part of the discussion we had last night. Is I shared with the group that there was a part of my life where I remember it as clear as day, standing at the front door with a backpack on my back and saying, "I'm the hell out of here if you don't let me be who I am." And
Right.
when you get to that place in your mind that you are ready to leave behind the family unit that brought
Yeah.
you into the world,
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
Huge. Huge. Yeah.
And my siblings don't, it's aged me differently. My
Mhm.
siblings don't get that. They never
Right.
had to say, "Who am I without that?"
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I really, I'm like taking that in, because that feels like such a one of those really profound moments, I'm sure, in your life, that we're just kind of pinned. Uh,
Yeah,
and,
and
and and that's exactly what I'm talking about, where a lot of the time our biggest growth isn't in these really sunshine and unicorn moments. I mean, I'm sure that was a extremely painful period of extreme growth for you to get to that point.
Yeah, it was, and the aloneness of it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like you have. It's not like people think, oh well, you just got, no, no, you don't have. It's not like you know across the street is a family that's going to take you in, right?
Right.
You're saying I'm out of here basically to be my own authority,
Right.
even if it means eating garbage. I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
It can feel like jumping off a cliff. Hey, why don't you go jump off the cliff without a parachute?
yeah,
And you get to that point. I think a lot of people in our community, that's a narrative of, I hear that a lot when I have trans clients or trans friends. I got to a point where it was this or end my life, and that's where I got. And so I thought, well, what do I have to lose? That was a lot of what I counsel people about too, is being in these impossible situations. I can't live authentically. I can't not live authentically. And for me, as a coach, I don't want to see people in pain, but it's also a great place to come in and hold space for someone.
it's a
You
beautiful
know,
place, and it's the
yeah,
the value of what you do when you're doing that is just priceless.
yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
know,
for me too, I always feel like it's such an honor. It's
it
just an
is
honor. Yeah,
to hold that space of love and safety and acceptance, and how rare that is. You know,
yeah. We need more of it in the world.
we s-
I
we
have this big
do.
heart. We just need more of it in the world. And we
We
need to
do,
love it.
and that's I think, and the funny thing is, there's a universal theme to that because everybody, in varying degrees, has had that experience of being alone,
Yeah,
and that's a that's something that everybody can relate to if they're willing to. Like I
yeah,
guess you said, if they're willing to see that shadow side of them, that
yeah.
scared side of them. Um, so let's take that internal family systems. We were talking about how you see something political outside of yourself. How do you tell the different parts of me?
Mm,
For example, when I saw that part of me last night,
yeah.
the how do I navigate that?
So what we would do from an internal family systems perspective, like if we were in a session and you came to me and you said, God, I'm worried because I just blew my gasket in this situation and it didn't feel comfortable. Then we would really make a space where we would there's a big somatic aspect to internal family systems. It doesn't work for everyone. There's kind of a mainstream roadmap that you follow if you're learning internal family systems. Where do you feel that in or around your body? And usually it's in or around because some people are not able, that might not be a safe place to feel it in their body. They may be very disconnected from their body. So it may be way out here that they're feeling it from a protective standpoint. But we look into that. Where are you feeling this in or around your body? I tend to be a little more broad, and I think maybe part of that's my Jungian influence is and I'm a little bit of a rebel. So, I
Just a little, right? Yeah.
I just go rogue from time to time. But I think that also, definitely from a neurodivergent standpoint, people are going to experience things in different ways. Some people just aren't going to relate to where you feel that in your body. They might have a thought. They might experience something in colors. Uh, they might have a totally different experience that I don't want to mandate. Uh, so I tend to say, how are you experiencing that? Let's set a space. And when you think about that part of you, I'll start using parts language so people get a little bit used to that.
Yeah.
I never have anyone go, what are you talking about, part of me? It's so interesting because people kind of get it and they just go with that. That part of you that really kind of was experiencing that strong emotion. How
I
were you?
just and I just heard it. I mean, it's my heart. It was my heart.
Yeah, yeah.
When you
So
said that,
then,
I put myself back into last night when it happened. How did I feel? My heart.
yeah. So let's go there for a minute. So when you say your heart, just feel into that. Feel how you're experiencing that, how you know that's your heart.
It's just that it's that cliche, the heavy heart, right?
Yeah,
Heavy heart. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm hearing that heavy heart,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering, like, with that heavy heart, when you're experiencing that, what does that heavy heart want you to know?
That I'm loved. I love. Okay, there's so much of this conversation I just love. I
Yeah.
love somatic. I love talking about that, but I love the fact that you took it outside of. It's not just your body. You're right. Some people see things. Some
Right.
people could even hear something. We're
Absolutely.
all stimulated and learn in different modalities. So I
Yeah.
love how you did that. I did feel in my heart, and I did hear, that I'm loved. But
Yeah.
that's really amazing. So if if I was in the macrocosm and I turn on the news or I flip the phone and the news thing pops up with some offensive headline,
Yeah.
can I apply your methodology to that situation?
Absolutely. Because a lot of times what happens is if we find, if we're watching the news and we see something very offensive, and a lot of people are, I hear a lot of talk about bullying. It feels so
Oh,
bullying. So, and people, they're getting really, really having a hard time holding this. And I don't mean, I have a lot of friends who are therapists and doctors, and I'm hearing from all kinds of people that they're having a very hard time holding this when they even have all these mental health tools. And I think what's happening is if you think about it, okay, bullying behavior, it's very possible that there's bullying behavior in this person's past. So if this person was raised by a very bullying parent, it's not just bringing up the current situation, which is challenging enough, but it's bringing up this dynamic very likely that, oh my God, here's my bully. Here I am helpless. What can I possibly do about this? I'm back in this situation. And now we have this young part that's really coming up going, this isn't safe. I'm back in this situation. And then we have these protective parts of us, which usually happens in internal family systems. If a young part gets triggered, we've built all these protections. So these protective parts come, and now maybe we're walking around and someone cuts us off in traffic and we're going, hey, getting out of our car, what the hell do you think's. And then we go, oh my God, how did I do that? I'm like, well, because this little part has been triggered and these protective parts are on high alert, and now we have a situation.
oh, I love it. Wow. So in those protect, it's how do a lot of people respond with sarcasm, with
Mhm.
criticism, with anger, with
Yeah,
tears. I mean,
yeah.
right? There's so many different ways that people respond to it.
Addiction,
Oh yeah.
food is a great one. Food's a great
Chocolate.
chocolate. It's a great strategy, for these protectors. Like I'm going to numb myself with food, or I'm going to numb myself with alcohol, drugs, whatever. And that's why one of the other things I love from an internal family system, if someone comes in and says, I'm addicted to drugs, we get people on the hotline, maybe someone's addicted to heroin, maybe they're doing heroin when I'm talking to them. Uh, I don't have to pathologize that person. I just see, oh, how is this part? This part is trying to soothe itself from some kind of concern. So let's explore that. So it's a very non pathologizing model. So there's not much that's brought to me that I go, oh, I have my parts that, and then if something comes up and, you know, kind of challenges off of my social justice part,
Learning for you, right? Yeah.
yeah, then I'm like,
Opportunities to learn for you. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of times when I'm in a session, I'll have to tell my parts, okay, you know what I got? I've got this. Can you just go wait in another room? You don't have to be here. I appreciate it. I get a lot of manager parts that are like, you could do that a little differently. What if you did that? And then it's sidetracking me. It's like, thank you very much. I'm going to take that into consideration and give me just a little bit of space so I can stay in that, self energy. So,
Oh, that's neat. So, and people could also do that just the same way. When you see a triggering element, you could just, I'm taking care of you. Don't,
yeah.
little Chris. You're not on the playground again. You're not getting picked for the basketball team, right? It's not the basketball team lineup.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then I can kind of say, I'll take care of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the great things, I think, in life, and certainly in this kind of work, is curiosity. So if a part of me is triggered, it's like, what's going on, friend? What's going on in there? Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on?
Mm.
And sometimes we can't do that in the moment. I have my moments, and I think practitioners and psychologists and therapists, and I've got, so many friends that I get to see behind the scenes. And none of us are perfect. Everybody has
There's all,
issues. And because I love to model humanity, I get it wrong all the time. I get it right a whole lot more than I used to, and I've individuated and gotten to a place in my life that I feel is very beautiful and meaningful. Not that it's without challenges, but, we're also human and we get to be human.
and then just go back to holding it lightly with a little
Mhm.
curiosity,
Yeah,
right? With a little curiosity. You just
yeah,
keep practicing, right? It's the practice. It's the
yeah.
practice. But there's always another layer. I like to say the layer of the onion. There's another one. There's always another one. So, um,
Absolutely. That's a great analogy for so many things, but soul work and
yeah.
yeah.
Well, this has been a great call. Went a little long. Is there anything? But I love it. I mean, I just love what the world really, what the world needs so much right now, right?
I
Is
agree.
is IFS, this understanding, being self-aware, looking at themselves, having a sense of curiosity, having compassion, holding it lightly.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to share or something I'd cut you off on or
Not at all. I have a lot of gratitude for being here and sharing this space and sending lots of love and compassion to all your listeners. And thanks again for having me here.
oh, I love it. It's I've learned to just listen to my instinct and feel energy and when I talk to follow it, like this has just been such a great conversation and I feel so lucky to learn. I'm continuing like you are. We're always learning, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. That's great. Yeah.
Now, do you provide any services online or on via your website, or are you mostly in local work with a local organization?
No, actually, I'm doing practicums because of social work, so that's all local. But most of my client work is by Zoom online.
Okay,
Yes,
so
or
they
phone
can
call because some people have issues where Zoom doesn't work for them, or they're in front of computers all day long, and phone calls can be great. Yeah,
look you up on your website.
yeah, yeah. I'll give you that information. You're welcome to link it if you want.
Oh, great, great. All right. Well, I appreciate this has been great, Orlando. Thank you
Yeah,
for all the energy that you're putting out into the world.
my pleasure, my
Yeah.
honor. Thank you.
Thanks. All
Yeah.
right,
So
listeners. Thanks for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It has been delightful having you with us. I hope you learned something. Well, how could you not from this conversation? And keep following the Spiritual Artist Podcast and check out what's coming up in the future. And if you go to YouTube, you can also follow me there. Talk to you soon and go out and be creative. Thanks a lot. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.